This is a video response to Onision, who recently made a video on his Onision Speaks channel describing why he is a Republican and why he believes that the ideals of the Republican Party of America are the best way for America to reestablish its roots and become the great nation it once was in order to become more powerful, become more prevalent, and be able to offer its citizens the most that it possibly can. Now, upon watching the video, I think that it probably was made somewhat to spark controversy and bring more attention to him, which is fine. I'm giving him the attention now. I think this because he also included Why I Love Fox News in his title, and a news medium that has a bias towards a particular ideology is not tied to the ideology itself. And a lot of people have problems with Fox News, specifically media bias it may have. Like how all media outlets have media bias. He doesn't really explain what makes Fox News special, and since it's a huge topic of discussion, not a lot of people on the internet like Fox News, it leads me to believe he did this just to spark interest from people. And that's fine. I mean, he got my interest, he got my attention, and he got the attention of his thousands of followers as well. I hope to possibly reach as many of them as I can. And if you are one of his followers who's watching me, I hope very sincerely that you watch as much of this as you can and you give it serious consideration. It's okay if you disagree with me. I just like you to at least listen, and then maybe we can both learn and grow a little bit together. So I thank you for your time, and let's see what we can make out of this. One major topic he discusses in his video is slavery. Basically, there's two sides of this. One, the idea that racism was not necessarily within the slavery. It was sort of a necessary evil for the economy of the South, because they needed it. It was built upon that. Agriculture, largely the cotton production. They needed it, so it wasn't necessarily a racial thing. And while he doesn't believe that it's good to have slavery, he does, as the second point, believe it was bad to make a constitutional amendment to explain why slavery was bad. He believes in passing laws that make sense and are just, but he doesn't believe in amending the Constitution for these things, because that was an unnecessary action, and it takes us away from the basics of what our Constitution is. I have a couple of responses to this. First off, the point that it wasn't racially charged, I agree to some extent. I understand that it was a necessity for those people at that time, and I do think it's a little hypocritical for the North, for the Northerners, the Yankees, to say, oh no, well, slavery is wrong and we're the good guys, when they had absolutely nothing at stake. If slavery was banned, they lost absolutely nothing, largely because they didn't even have slavery in the northern states. They had no skin in the game. But that doesn't mean that slavery did not involve racism. It did a lot. I mean, the southern slave owners didn't just look at it as a utilitarian thing, saying, oh, well, we need slaves. They were very ideologically charged with this. They were very racist. They would beat slaves just because they felt they weren't working hard enough, or because it was fun to do so. They would also take extra extents and extra measures to make sure that they stayed inferior. One big way they would do this is take a married couple, if they owned two slaves who were married to each other, and they would sell one off and keep the other one. That separates them. Oftentimes it means that children don't have two parents, which means that they're less likely to have a stable life, which is very problematic. If you take away what makes someone human and you treat them more like an animal, they'll start to behave more like an animal. And like an animal, they may be more savage and less capable of reasoning with, but they're also much easier to manipulate and force to do what you want them to. And even today, this type of mentality still is prevalent. It was up to the civil rights era where there were still several white people performing lynches, doing horrible things to black people, threatening them not to step out of their place. But even today, if you look at the South end of America, there's a lot of racism prevalent. The mentality is there. Obviously, it wasn't just an ideological thing. The economy was a big part of it, but it goes so far beyond that. And if you ignore that, I think you're missing such an important detail of the history of it. As for the Constitution impacting how slavery worked in the South, I do think that it's wrong to amend the Constitution just to pass new laws. I do think that the Constitution's purpose is not that. It's something greater than that. If you look at the U.S. Constitution, it's very short in the way that it's written. It doesn't have a ton of details, like India, for example. India is a perfect example of a country that has a constitution that is dozens of times larger than the U.S. Constitution. If you look at it, it doesn't actually tell you how to do things like healthcare or the legal system, for example. It just lays out the very basic foundational ideas of the country, and we're basically left to figure out how to get to those ideals. That's why it doesn't specify things, because it's very possible that different people can have different ways of achieving these things. It's about maximizing personal liberty so that you can live your life and maximize this happiness. And when you ignore that and say that it's just a small set of list of rules to obey, like gun rights, freedom of speech rights, you're missing the point there. It's not just that. It's the foundational ideas. I would argue that binding slavery in the Constitution wasn't a new thing. It was a thing that was already there. The right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. To have private property. These are things that were in the Constitution, ideas that were prevalent, but we were just not doing it anyway. Amending the Constitution 3 times, in fact, to ensure this whole racial equality thing was just making sure that we were doing what was meant to be. It's not like, for example, adding income tax to the U.S. Constitution or banning alcohol in the U.S. Constitution. It's not like that. It's taking what was already there and making it finite, making it definitive, saying that you must do this. You must ensure the life, liberty, and property of everyone, including the black people. So it wasn't a change. It was a reestablishment of what was previously established. That's my take anyway. Now, Onision brings up 2 major social issues that I think are very worth talking about. Those are gay marriage and abortion. Now, I do actually believe, because I used to follow him a lot, I do believe Onision has made videos in the past saying that he supports things like gay marriage and abortion, but now he seems to have switched his position. I'm not sure why, but I'm going to analyze what he said and try and just work backwards from that mentality and see why I disagree with him. Now, when he discusses gay marriage, one big topic he brings up is the Bible. He says he doesn't necessarily follow it, but it's a good document, and we should incorporate it into our lives. We should use it as a foundation in order to make ourselves a better world. And there is good stuff in the Bible, but one interesting point he makes is we don't follow it blindly 100%, like the verse that says we should stone homosexuals. That's a good thing. But he also says the Bible states that marriage is between a man and a woman. Like, for 2 men to lie with each other as if one is a man and the other is a woman, that is wrong. That's what the Bible says. My problem is that is an arbitrary distinction. Why are you saying that some of the old verses are good and some of the old verses are wrong? In my mind, this misses the point of what the Bible is supposed to be. For me, the point is the Old Testament rules are not something that people necessarily follow because they aren't relevant anymore. If you actually read the New Testament of the Bible and you read what Jesus did or was depicted as doing in the Bible, a lot of what he did was telling the Pharisees, the old Jewish leaders who were upholding the laws that they had obeyed for thousands of years, that they were wrong and that they were almost evil. Because the fact is they just had a set of rules and they're like, do this, do this. Do this. They were unable to look at reality. They were unable to just look at the situation and use their heart, use their feelings and emotions, and evaluate the situation, think for themselves in order to determine what the best option is. And that's the way to get truly good people is not to make them blindly obey certain standards. It's to get them to teach how to think, enabling them to develop those critical thinking skills. And that, in my opinion, is probably both the best thing that Jesus taught and the thing that Christians dislike the most. Because it shouldn't be telling you what you can and can't do. It should be teaching you how to think, not what to think. And the Bible actually seems to suggest that in the New Testament. So when you reject some of the old verses and you say that other of the verses should be highly influential in our thought process, that's the arbitrary distinction. It's like, why say that some are that way and others are not? And that's a question that needs to be answered. But I don't think there really is a proper answer when you really analyze it. I'm open to hearing differences, but I don't think they're there. Another point I want to bring up with gay marriage is Onision says he's not opposed to same-sex couples getting, for example, a civil union. He just believes that it should be different from the marriage, because once again, if a marriage is defined between being a man and a woman, then if it's a man and a man, or a woman and a woman, it can't be the same. But he says one very important thing, and that is most people would not have a problem with it. And I think that's true. Most people wouldn't really have a problem with it necessarily because it's equal, essentially, in the law. It's interpreted the same way. Nobody gets better or worse treatment than anybody else. That is true. However, once again, it's arbitrary. My favorite word of the day. It is arbitrary distinction. Why do some groups get to be called a married couple and others not be able to be called a married couple? Let's say that if 2 white people get married, that is a marriage. But if a white person and a black person, or a white person and a Hispanic person get together, they can get all the same legal benefits as a white couple. They just are not allowed to call it a marriage. They have to call it a civil union. Honestly, it makes me think of back during the Civil Rights era when many black people were forced to drink from the black water fountain. They couldn't drink from the same water fountain as the white people. Now, is that the end of the world? No. Who honestly cares? They both have water fountains. They can both get water, but it's the principle of the matter. It's the principle of the matter. Why are you saying that some people can do this and other people have to get a different thing? Why are we separating ourselves from them? The fact is, when it comes to humanity, we're all in the same ship. We're all in this together. We all live life and we're going through piece by piece. We're all equal. We have to understand that we are equal. We're playing on the same battlefield. We're all achieving the same things, or we hope to achieve the same things. We're all trying to find success in our lives. And if we ignore that and form these distinctions, these magical barriers between ourselves, we're not doing ourselves any favor. We have to look for commonalities and look for ways to come together and help each other to develop, not ways to separate each other. And that is the problem with this idea of gays getting civil unions and straights getting marriages. While there's technically no difference, it's the principle of the matter. Why are you making that distinction? And I don't think there's a proper answer for that either. Now, the second major social issue that Onision brings up is abortion. Now, a number of people say that if you get pregnant, then regardless, you should bring the child to term. And that is wrong in my opinion for two reasons. One, because obviously there's as much time as you're putting in, that's 9 months to raise it, but it also costs so much money nowadays to raise children. It can be about $250,000, I believe is the current number, to raise a child from birth to adulthood. So that's why Onision doesn't go there. He says instead that you should rate, or at least give birth to the child, and then give them up for adoption, so that you don't have to deal with the consequences yourself. Now, I do believe this is a step in the right direction, saying, for example, that if someone gets raped, they shouldn't have to give up their life to raise that child. However, I still believe that it's inhumane to give birth to a child and then just give it up to the adoption center. Because the thing is, it's not all rainbows and lollipops there. It's actually a very bad situation. Partially because there's such poor conditions, the worst of which is a lot of children don't stay in the same place for too long. They're bumped around from place to place. They're unable to actually make friends and establish relationships. They can have difficulty trusting people later on in life. They're more likely to be violent because they feel they have no connection like this. It's a very sad situation, and when people don't acknowledge that, it makes it seem like they don't actually care about the true morality of the situation. They just care about satisfying their personal consciousness, which goes back to the past statement I made. The idea that you are not actually looking at the situation and determining what's best. You just have a law that says what to do, and you do it regardless. This is not an example of you thinking how to think or why to think. It's just what to think. And when you do that, it causes these problems where it's a much more negative situation. I think the worst part about having a child and just giving it up for adoption immediately, though, is the fact that they have no one to love them, no one to care about them, no one to raise them, no one to be there for them, no one to show them the marvels of the world. You know, a lot of people have told me that I take off my father in many ways, and that tends to be true for a lot of people. We are like our parents because we look up to them as role models. In some ways, they complete us. We're dependent upon them, and we love them. If they don't have that, they can seriously mess up their lives, and I view that as a major problem. They're missing one of the most important things in life. They don't have a family to care for them and raise them. They have no one. They're alone. They're terrified. And I view that as just one of the saddest things that exists in America today. The fact that there are so many children who go through this. I don't understand how that is a justifiable idea. But then Onision brings up the point of, am I glad that my mother didn't abort me when I was a child? And if I say, yes I am, then I am a hypocrite. The only problem is I don't view that as a relevant issue. Because I don't believe in the idea of looking at multiple situations and examining them as whether it's this one, or this one. The fact is, the past happened and the future will happen. There's only one version of reality, the version that happens. The fact is, I am me. I may not be the best possible version of me, but I'm the only version of me that exists. And the fact is, I only exist because I've experienced the things that I have. I have come in contact with the stimuli that I have. I've met the people I've had. I've read the things that I've read. I've seen and felt the things that I have seen and felt. So many millions of things have caused me to become the person that I am. I'm not the way I am because of my biology, of my physiology. It's because of my past, my experiences, my memories. And that is what makes you human. When people ask if the fetus is a human or not, technically, yes it is. It has the biology of a human. It has the little arms, the legs, the head. And if it's a bad thing that abortion happens, this might be a little controversial to say, but in a way I would say yeah, because it is a life that's being taken away, and that's sad. Almost in the same way that if you just go out shooting and like hunting, and you shoot some sparrows, I think that would be bad because it's an unnecessary termination of life. However, the fetus is not equal to the human because they don't have what I described. They don't have any experiences. They don't have any memories. They don't have anyone to attach themselves to. They don't have sympathy and empathy. They don't have thoughts. They can't think about their existence and come up with new perspectives to view life from. They have no awareness. They can't realize that they are in a world that is much larger than them. They lack what makes them human. That human aspect, the human element, love. They're incapable of it. So while it is alive, it's not quite the same as human, because humans is not what we are, but what we do. We can do things that nothing else in the universe, as far as we can tell, can do. But you have to be nurtured and brought up to that point. That's the beautiful thing about parenthood, in my opinion. It's the fact that you raise someone who at first is totally dependent upon you, but as time goes on, they slowly become more equal to you, to the point where they're, say, in their 30s, and you're maybe in your 60s or 70s, and you're at the point where you are dependent upon them in many ways. They are the mature ones. They are the strong, powerful, intellectual, mature people. They are the ones who can help you. They're not just your toy, your thing to work with. They're becoming a person. It is that development that makes it magical. That's what makes life worth it. That is what makes us human. So to ask if I would be upset if I was aborted or not, it doesn't make any sense, because if I was aborted, there would be no me to speak of. The person I am is not just my biology. It's everything that I have ever encountered in my life. Literally every single thing has played a factor into who I am, and that is being ignored if you don't think about that. You just ask this question blankly. So I have a major issue with that as well. Well, that's all I have to say about the video. It is linked down below if you want to watch it and formulate your own opinions. If you did stick around, I hope that maybe I caused you to think about something that you did not before. If you have any problems with this, you can leave your comment down as well, and I can maybe consider it and grow as an intellectual as well. I really like the conversations. That's probably my favorite thing about YouTube, so I hope to hear more of it. And I think that's all I have to say, so thank you very much for watching, and have a good day.